to the Tennis IQ podcast. I'm Brian Lomax.
And I'm Josh Berger. And in today's episode, we are going to discuss the paradox of the ego, which actually comes from, which is another chapter of the book Arete, which we have talked about some in the past and dove a little bit into some of the different chapters. But this idea of the paradox of the ego is this sort of two-pronged reality, I guess we could say, of improvement, of sort of some of the necessary aspects of ego that are, you know, I would say critical to somebody's to somebody's improvement and to somebody's self-belief and the fact that they can, be successful now, but also make improvements long term, but also the some of the pitfalls, some of the drawbacks of the ego and the reality that the ego can really get in your way. So I think in this episode we can talk about sort of both sides of that and then offer some suggestions for how players can maybe manage their own egos so that it doesn't get in the way, but also make sure that some of those positive aspects of the ego can remain there, or we can actually build some of those aspects so that we're able to use sort of both sides of that coin.
And I think looking at the text, it is really trying to communicate that the ego itself isn't necessarily the problem, because we talk about letting go of the ego, but you can't let go of something you don't have. And I think that when we talk about something like tennis, in order to become a great player, you have to develop a strong sense of self and who you want to be. You have to have a strong sense of like what your purpose is, what you stand for, who you wish to become. And, a lot of players don't have that. And so what they tend to try to do is build self-confidence and self-belief through ego concerns like outcomes. They feel as if winning is the only way to really build their ego and their self-belief and their self-confidence. And of course, it's part of it. Winning helps, but we all ultimately know, especially if, we look at outcome versus process, that you cannot control winning. And therefore, you're almost putting your ego or your self-belief in the hands of something that is going to be very variable in your career. And if your self-confidence and your self-belief are completely tied to your outcomes, then it's going to be a roller coaster ride. And so when I, hear this idea of the paradox of the ego, what I'm, I'm hearing is that you do need to have a strong sense of who you are out there, but it cannot just be based on outcomes. So a lot of times when we talk to athletes, Josh, I think we talk about, what are some ego-oriented beliefs that we see from players, where it becomes all about winning, where it becomes all about beating others, or being better than other people. I mean, tennis naturally invites one-on-one comparison. But when you really break that down and you say, okay, if it's all about winning for you, I have the perfect solution. Just play people way below you. And almost no one takes that option.
Right.
And the reason is because it's not all about winning. And even they begin to realize that, right? Oh, well, that would get boring. That wouldn't be challenging. It's like, but wait a second. You just told me you just want to win and beat other people. I just gave you the formula. Go ahead and do it, right? You want to beat 8-year-olds, beat 8-year-olds. But then you come to realize it's really not all about that. But that's what you hear a lot, even in college situations. You'll hear players say, "Yeah, I want to just beat other people. I want to beat that person." And maybe to a certain extent, there's some positive motivation there. But I feel like that's a person who hasn't really yet developed a true sense of who they are and what they stand for. And so they're prioritizing something out of their control as a means of making themselves feel better. And I feel like that's almost like false ego. It's a false sense of who you are. And so I think it's very And we've talked about the idea of the purpose-based identity versus the performance-based identity. I think this is really a lot about that. And can you really figure out who you want to be? And then how does winning fit into that? What's its place there? It has a place, but it's probably a little bit lower on the priority hierarchy than the player who thinks it's the only thing that matters.
To me, it's a big difference between wanting or needing to win now versus having the patience to understand that you're trying to build something long term. If it's all about winning right now, then each win and loss feels like everything, right? Each day at practice, each game to 21, each practice set, each tournament feels like the end of the world if I don't win it. Because I have my ego so tied to those results that winning right now is everything. Where the other way of seeing it is so much more long term, where it's all about, okay, I'm trying to be the best player that I can be. And does that mean that I'm trying to win this match today? Yes. I'm trying to do everything that I can do to win today, but I also understand that it's not all about today. It's more long term. I'm trying to build skills today and this week and this month, etc., to be that best player that I can be long term. And if I know that if I don't win today, then okay, would I prefer to win? Yes, sure, but me not winning today is just another day, is just another tournament. So I think it's, and I think it also has a lot to do with our expectations, right? I think when ego is in the driver's seat too much, we expect to win. We expect to win. We expect to have those results right now. Where the other way of looking at it is being a little bit more realistic, understanding that we're going to have great days and not such great days. Where these things happen, and rather than it being catastrophic when it happens, it's simply that's just this is how it goes sometimes, right? Sometimes we're not going to play our best. Sometimes we're going to have slumps. Sometimes we're going to lose to players that we feel like we should beat. But this is just part of the process of being a tennis player. And if we can take that sort of long-term approach, focusing, and put that ego aside, or at least move past that ego, I guess we could say, then those results, those day-to-day results don't feel as consequential. I like to sometimes, and I think I've probably said this in the past, but I almost compare it in a little bit in a certain way to like the stock market, somebody's sort of results on a regular basis, where if we get, you look at the stock market and on a particular day it's up or down a 0.5% or 1%, and there's a ton of emotion. There's a ton of emotion one way or the other: excitement, fear, anxiety, joy, whatever it is. But ultimately, it's not about what happens in a particular day. It's about, okay, well, what's happened this month, or what's happened this quarter or this year, right? So if we have the ability to zoom out, we can more so see the big picture, see the direction that things are going in. And I think it's the same thing for an athlete, right? I think instead of getting so wrapped up in each win and loss and in each outcome, and being so tied to all that, which I think is really where the ego comes in. If we can take a step back, if we can keep our priorities, in mind, and understand really what is most important, that we're trying to be the best player that we can be, then we can zoom out a little bit, see the big picture, and understand the direction that things are going in. Are we moving in the right direction? Are we making progress? So I think it's just a different way to look at things. I think for a lot of people, sort of their default state is that first way of getting so caught up in each result. But I agree with the premise that there's that there is importance of having aspects of that ego, but ultimately being able to move past it and be able to focus on some of these other sorts of things, more process related and more big picture about, being the best player that we can be.
Yeah, and a couple things came to mind as you were speaking there, Josh. So one was, the idea of excuse me, proving yourself today versus improving. That's a very sort of, who I am right now. I need to win to make myself feel good, or I need to win to prove that I'm worthy, or that I'm better than somebody, or I'm going to prove myself to someone else. And very often when we have that sort of mindset, we make short-term oriented decisions. We also may change how we play based on the score because we're so concerned with winning that it actually can sabotage our chances versus improving. And I think this is where it's very important to set the context, and as young as possible, although older players can certainly learn this. I've worked with a number of adult players over 40 who have completely gravitated to this perspective. It's really having a hierarchy in your mind of what's important. If winning is at the top of the hierarchy, which is an ego-oriented concern, you will improve less, you'll probably win less, and you'll enjoy tennis less. If that's what you want, then you can put winning at the top. But that is how it's going to work out. Again, unless you choose to play people way below your level. You may win more, but you'll be bored, and you certainly won't become the best player you can become. But if you can have a stronger sense of what you really want from tennis, and it's about becoming the best you can be, well, then that sits at the top of the hierarchy. And everything else that you do feeds that purpose. So now, we could take your example, Josh, of zooming out. Let's zoom back in a little bit. All right. What do we want to look at day to day? We want to look at what did you learn? Such that we can put that into the next performance and the next performance and the next performance. The more that we emphasize learning in the environment, the results will take care of themselves. And you'll enjoy yourself more because you can always learn something. That's something you can always take from the court. Can we also learn to try to bring our best selves to each moment, to play with a great attitude, to play every match with everything that we have, right? That's Rafa Nadal's definition of personal satisfaction and pride. Can we do that more? Not let the ego-oriented concern of creating an outcome get in the way of attitude and effort, because we do see that. Or we see it corrupt decision-making. People get in the lead, all of a sudden they start thinking about winning, and something happens. That's your ego. That's an ego-oriented concern sabotaging your process, where we want it to be the other way around. It's like, all right, yeah, I'm in a winning position. This is what I need to do. I keep playing with a great attitude. I keep playing my game. I give it everything I have. Even if you lose that match, Josh, you can at least come off the court saying, well, I did all the right stuff. Even in the big moment, I did what I was supposed to do. And that's just the nature of the game. Sometimes it's pretty cruel. You can do all the right things and still lose. But you could feel better about yourself and your effort when that's the situation versus you let the score change how you play, change how you behave. There's nothing really but regret there. Now, regret can also teach you things because we don't want it to happen again. But if winning is at the top of the hierarchy, regret is going to be one of the emotions that you feel more often because you're letting the ego-oriented concern get in the way of how you do things. So I think, the more that players can identify with a purpose of simply becoming the best they can become and making learning and enjoyment of what we're doing key components of that, like right below the purpose, then outcomes are below that, right? But we always have a will to win. We don't necessarily have to focus on the need to win. Big difference in my mind. One's an outcome, not fully in control. Will to win translates to behaviors. fully in your control, right? That's
Yep.
what Nadal is talking about when he says giving it everything you have, every point, right? That's the will, the determination to find a way to try to win. So I think if people can, again, conceptualize like what their hierarchy of, like, we'll call them almost like tennis needs, right? So there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've got our hierarchy of needs for tennis, right? And purpose at the top, becoming the best we can be has got to be that. That's at the top. Then learning, enjoyment, enjoying the sport, enjoying competing, learning and improving. Everything else, all other goals, all other outcomes serve those things. So in my mind, that's what needs to happen. And when I've worked with players, Josh, this has been my philosophy over the last 6 or 7 years. When people buy into this, the enjoyment level goes up of the sport. They learn more and they improve more. It takes varying amount of times for people to buy in, but inevitably when they do, something starts to click. And now they're developing a better sense of who they are out there. Now they can do like what this paradox of the ego chapter is suggesting, which is don't worry so much about winning and losing. We know who you are. We know what you're working toward. Winning and losing are part of that journey. We are learning and improving from it. That's way more important. That's you letting go of the ego because you have a strong sense of purpose. So I don't know what you think about that, but that to me is really the crux of the chapter.
I definitely agree. I think that's well said. Something that I see often with this idea of prioritizing winning is sort of a fundamental misunderstanding where I think sometimes players feel that, okay, I want to win. So that means I need to focus on winning. I need to focus on winning and losing. I need to focus on my UTR or my WTN or my ranking. And I'm focusing on that. I'm focusing on that. I'm focusing on that. And what ends up happening is a couple things. First of all, through that focus on winning and results and outcomes, they lose sight of the process that they need to get there, right? They lose sight of that process piece, that mastery piece, we can say, that purpose piece of trying to be the best player that they can be. All of that takes a back seat because it's all about winning. It's all about winning right now. And, and that's what's prioritized. And they completely lose sight of how they get there. So the process slash mastery slash purpose piece gets, takes a back seat. So that's the first issue. And then second of all, it ends up putting a tremendous amount of pressure on, right? If it's all about winning today, then your whole identity is based on that winning. And if you win today, okay, great. You you feel worthy, you feel like you succeeded, you feel like a champ. But if it doesn't happen, which is gonna, as we know, is gonna happen, close to half the time, then what does that say about you? If it's all about winning and you've lost, then where does that leave you? So, I think, yeah, it can put a tremendous amount of pressure on you. You lose sight of everything that you need to do to actually make improvements, to actually win more. And it's completely unsustainable because when you lose, which is going to happen plenty, then what do you have? What's left? What's left to latch onto? Where with the other approach, with the approach that's more about purpose, that's more about being the best that we can be, which is more about mastering, the sport to the best level that you can, or trying to be excellent, then you understand that winning and losing and slumps and injuries and all of it is simply part of the process, is simply what happens to a tennis player along their journey of mastery, along their journey of getting better and better and being the best that they can be. That doesn't mean that you're the best player on each particular day. It doesn't mean you're going to win every match, but it means that you are taking steps towards being the best that you can be.
As you were speaking there, you brought up UTR, WTN, although I don't really hear anybody talking about WTN yet in terms of like understanding their number or saying, oh, I'm a 3 or 13 or whatever. But with UTR, I mean, how many players have you heard really almost connect their sense of self to that number,
Yep.
and having to it go higher and doing everything they can to make it go higher, and that's really probably more of an issue for younger players, especially those who have the desire to play college tennis because they know that that's a number that gets evaluated. But I think this happens with adults too, right? Because we have other rating systems, like the NTRP system in the US. So, people being 3.5, 4.0, 4.5, people get connected to that number. Or let's say they're not even playing USTA leagues. They might be connected to the fact that they're playing A, or there's a league here in Boston. I don't know why they call it this. To me, this is an amazing ego thing, Josh. There used to be an A league, and they decided to rename it Super A.
Nice.
So like, what? Why? Right? Why are we somehow like better than A now, right? But that's a totally ego-oriented renaming of the league. And so now we're all attached to the fact that we're in the Super A league. And it can be difficult to unplug from some of these systems. But again, coming back to the paradox piece, can you let go of it such that isn't weighing you down so much? And you can say, you know what? Forget UTR. I don't even need to look at that. If I just do these things great every single day, that number will take care of itself. I can't control that. I can't control who I play and what their UTR is or whatever, but I can control what I do day to day. I can control my schedule of tournaments that I play and simply going out and doing my best. And the UTR will take care of itself. And same with the other rating systems. So it's hard. I think it's actually harder now than it was when I was a kid. We didn't have any rating systems. There was no internet. We didn't know what our ranking was. That was something that every maybe quarter you got in the mail that, oh, here's what the current rankings are. And I think there was a computer, but there might not have been. It might have been just a bunch of people in a room saying, yeah, this guy's first, this person's second, and so forth. I don't know. But
smoke-filled room.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but you didn't have a way to check it every single day.
Right.
And, that's why I think it's pretty hard today on people when they get hung up with these systems. So, detaching from these ego concerns is not necessarily easy. But, that's the challenge. This is the path of becoming a great player, and you learning to navigate through these various systems, using them maybe for yourself in productive ways. I do like the thing on UTR, Josh, on the stats tab, where they show your trend chart for the last year. I do like looking at that. I think that's like your stock market example. You can basically track the trend of that. And, when I see a player who's got a nice positive trend, then I know they're doing something right. They have some like solid systems in place. Then I look at some players who are completely flat over the course of a year, or maybe have even dipped. To me, that's a sign that, something in the system is broken. Something about the process is clearly not working. Whether they have the ability to examine that with themselves, their coaches, and whoever, that's obviously what they need to do. But do they have that ability? I don't know. Maybe they don't. That's the one part I really do like about UTR. You can see that 12-month view and see how somebody's growing in 12 months. You don't need to look at the details of every single win or loss, but if you can see that trend, like, all right, this shows me a player who's got a good training system and probably has, a good team around him or her, that we're seeing this kind of growth. Of course, there'll probably be some challenges along the way. Yeah, because I've worked with some players who've had, maybe like 1.2, 1.5 points of growth in 1 year, and then they get a little bit hung up on, oh, I need to rush it now. I need to push it harder. When instead you just need to say, no, this is totally working. Let's keep doing it. Right. So I do think, navigating those other systems, Josh, is can be hard for people. what we're suggesting is clearly not easy to do and maybe harder than ever.
Yeah, two things came to mind. I mean, I think first of all, the interesting thing about UTR, and I think players recognize this or will acknowledge this, is that you cannot play for a week and your UTR will go up or go down.
You cannot play for like 3 months. I
A
had one
month,
kid who was
3 months.
injured. His UTR went up like a point and a half over the course of 3 months, and he didn't play a single match.
Yeah, he's obviously doing something right.
Or all his former opponents are. Right?
Exactly. No, but that's the truth, that it's based not just on us, right? We can impact our UTR, but it's based on what our opponents are doing. Are they winning? Are they losing? UTR also shifts the algorithm at times, which causes people to go up or go down. So basing our identity too much on something, so much out of our control. I won't say completely out of our control, because obviously we can impact
we have
it.
influence on
But
it.
yeah, but such a large portion of that is out of our control, is ultimately unsustainable. And nobody's always goes up, right? If your UTR is always going up, eventually you become the person with the highest UTR, right? You become higher than every ATP WTA player. So that's the first piece, that it can go up and go down without you doing anything. So understanding that it's not necessarily a direct correlation to what you're doing, to your results or your process. But then the second piece, which I think is really important as well, is that in order to buy in to this idea of it being about you being the best player that you can be, and prioritizing your purpose and that mastery piece, and and trying to be excellent, in order to buy into that, you do sort of have to buck the trend of the way that other people are talking, right? You're at your local tennis club and you hear people talking about UTR. Oh, you're playing this person. His UTR, her UTR is this, right? Oh, you're you might hear it from a coach, or hear it from a parent, or hear it from other parents, or if you're a USTA adult league player, right? You hear people talking about results all the time. Oh, this person got bumped up, or that person got bumped up, or this person, did this in their league. And you hear a lot more about people's results and some of these external measures of performance, rather than the focus on, on the focus on improvement, on the focus on learning, right? So it's, in order to start thinking this way, in order to start operating in this way, it takes a certain bit of courage. It takes a certain bit of courage to understand that this sort of default way of thinking isn't necessarily the best way to operate, isn't necessarily sustainable, isn't necessarily optimal, right? It leads to, I think, going back to ego, it leads to the ego being significantly bruised or damaged anytime there's a loss. It leads to the ego being questioned when somebody has a slump, or somebody's injured or can't play for a period of time. So I think it, sort of going back to this chapter, it takes a certain bit of ego. It takes a certain bit of, I guess, self-knowledge, or just maturity, we could say, to understand that, to understand the issues with ego, and the issues with sort of I'd say the default system, and sort of understand the, that actually, even though other people are using it, why that's ultimately not the best way to operate, and to choose a different path.
Yeah, because when most people talk about competition and these things, most of them don't know what they're talking about. So when you hear all this talk about UTR and so forth, and I've tried to coach players on this topic, is they don't actually get it. They're still thinking in a, kind of corrupted, mob-like way of that this is the way to do it. And they just don't know what they're talking about. So you're not required to listen, because the players that we work with, we want them to make better choices. We want them to, this is one aspect of being a professional, Josh, is be willing to do things that others are not willing to do, right? So be willing to eliminate UTR as a concern from your life. Be willing to eliminate any rating system as a major concern from your life. That's doing something different than other people. And I think, we can very competently discuss that's the right way to go. As you just said, so much of UTR or rating systems is out of your control. It can go up and down without you doing anything. And yes, you have influence, but when that becomes a major driver in your life, you're looking at so many things that you can't control there. And if it's how you feel about yourself, then that becomes more problematic. So yeah, we want to make sure that we're being professional in this regard, that we are willing to do what other people are not willing to do. We are willing to look at competition in a way and study it in a way that will help us be our best. Because when you really look at the philosophies of great coaches and great players, none of them say simply focus on winning. None of them say that, right? I think of Bill Walsh, the famous football coach for the San Francisco 49ers, who said that when the environment is dedicated to learning, the results take care of themselves. I mean, his teams won 3 Super Bowls. And it was all about learning for him. And that's different than your average person, player, parent, who is demanding wins in the 12s. It makes no sense, right? We can also, again, go back to Brian Barker, one of our earliest episodes. His parents emphasized, and his coaches emphasized, being a great person. That was the number one concern for them. It wasn't about winning, but what happened? Brian was number 1 in New England in the 12s, in the 14s, in the 16s, in the 18s, and got a full scholarship to the University of South Carolina, top 15 program when he was there. Not about winning. It was all about being a great person. So we have to really understand, what are we putting our effort into? And is it something that we can more fully control such that we can become that best player we can become? Winning it, whether it's in the 12s or the 14s or the 16s, is not nearly as important as learning. And I would say the same for even adults. I mean, nobody cares if you're winning Super A. That's probably not going to go on your gravestone. I won the Super A League 5 times. Or I went to, USTA Nationals. That's not what it's about, right? Our legacy in tennis is not about a long list of achievements. Our legacy in tennis is going to be more about our impact on other people, our relationships there, who we inspired to do things. Of course, the achievements can be a part of the resume. But the last thing that we want to say, Josh, at the end of our career, or have somebody say about us was, yeah, he's a great player, but not a particularly nice person. It would be much better to have somebody describe us as a great person first. Also, was a really good tennis player. But what a great person, what a great, role model. Mom, father, whatever, brother, sister. That's really the legacy we're going to leave in tennis. And, there are people, of course, out there. I can think of some that I've come across who you would definitely describe as really good players, not good people. I don't know if that's the legacy that we are really pushing for people to learn, Josh, right? I think we're using tennis as a means of not only improving yourself as a tennis player, but improving yourself as a person. And to me, that's, again, that could be back up at the hierarchy part, right? Because tennis is, it's kind of an absurd activity. We're hitting a pressurized yellow ball between lines. We're not solving major societal problems on the court, but we're working on ourselves. And we're working on ourselves so we can be better people on the court, but also better people off the court. That, to me, is letting go of the ego. It's understanding there's more going on here than me winning some silly tennis match. right? With a yellow ball and lines and a net and all these rules that I never made up. Some, archaic scoring system. Like, why are we doing this? Right? There has to be more to it than just being the greatest in the world at hitting a ball.
I think that was, yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think that's ultimately what it's about, right? It's, yeah, if it's all about winning and losing, we completely lose sight of that. We completely lose sight of being the best person we can be. We completely lose sight of that legacy. We completely lose sight of, you know, what other people are going to remember us for, right? And it's not about some win or loss here or there. It's about how we went about things, how we treated people, how we operated. Um, and I think the interesting, I guess we could say, paradox as well is when we can put our focus on being the best player. And again, this goes back to our, I think it was episode 2 with Brian Barker. If we can focus on being the best person we can be and being the best player we can be, what do you know? That tends to lead to winning, right? So if and again, no part of this is us saying that that you shouldn't want or prefer to win a match when you're out there, right? I think part of being the best player you can be is giving your best effort, is using your tools, is trying to do your best to win because that's the challenge when you're out there. But if winning is so prioritized, then other things take a backseat. Then being the best player you can be and the best person you can be takes a backseat. If it's all about winning, why not cheat? Why not cheat? Why not make bad line calls? Right. And, if you say that to somebody, I think it starts to click and they say, oh, well, it's not just about that. Right. I don't want to be that way. Right. So I think if we can recognize that, yes, we prefer to win. Yes, long term, obviously, we want to have success in that way in this sport, but that it's ultimately a lot bigger than that. If we want to focus on those qualities of being the best person, best player we can be, and the more that we can prioritize those, guess what? We're going to win more, but we're also going to be able to be, as proud as possible of everything that we did out there, which is ultimately much more what it's actually about.
Yeah. So maybe one final thought, Josh, for me. I've been writing a book. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I've been writing. There's one particular chapter that's sort of on this topic, and for that chapter, I was doing some research on Vince Lombardi, the former coach of the Green Bay Packers in the NFL, and he has this famous quote about winning isn't the most important thing; it's the only thing. And what I learned through my research is that he actually didn't believe that and felt like the quote was taken out of context. What he meant to communicate was that it's not winning is the only thing. He felt like the will to win was the only thing. And I love that because that, again, is contrasting an outcome versus a behavior. So he expected his teams, no matter what the score was, to never stop having this will to win, to figure it out. When you look at Vince Lombardi's coaching philosophy, it was super process oriented. His teams were not particularly flashy. Now we're talking late 50s, early 60s, or into the late 60s. What they were known for was doing the basics really, really well. So their plays were not flashy at all. They basically would, line up, give the ball to the running back and run to the right, power sweep. And that's what they would repeat. They would be great at that. They were great at the fundamentals. And part of the fundamentals that Lombardi taught was this will to win. We never stop trying to win. So anytime that you see that quote, because you'll still see it, and a lot of people will point to it as a justification for winning being the most important thing, know that Lombardi's quote was taken out of context. And that he himself did not believe it. He believed that the will to win was the most important thing. And I think I was really glad to have found that, Josh, because that quote always bothers me. And it does get used by many people as, well, hey, Vince Lombardi, he was a great coach. This is what he said. But now we have a little bit more evidence that Lombardi himself didn't believe that and didn't coach that way. And so that, to me, it comes back to our definition of competitiveness, which is, priority 3 of that was having a strong will, having a strong desire to win all the time, always trying to play to win. So I just wanted to clarify something like that, because people will see that quote and they'll use it as a justification for focusing on winning.
I think that's a great point. To me, another coach that comes to mind is John Wooden, where he was probably more successful than any college basketball coach of all time, right? His teams won 10 titles. They won, 7 titles, 7 national championships in a row, where no other team, I believe, has won more than 4, 4 in a row. And and he was, yes, his teams won more than anybody, but what he was known for was not this focus on winning. He had his pyramid that's well known that people can look up. What is it? Pyramid of success.
Success, yes.
And winning is not on there. It's all about the values. It's all about the character traits. It's all about doing things the right way, tying your shoes the right way, practicing the right way, communication, teamwork, work ethic, all of that, all of those sorts of qualities that have to do with that process of playing better and better basketball. And yes, ultimately winning. But he was known for that focus on those qualities, that focus on, on that pyramid, on those main sort of building blocks. And it was known for not talking about winning, right? He would talk about all those other things except for winning. But what do you know? His teams won, and he was building people. He was building great men by this process, by this focus on doing things the right way. So I think, both your example of Vince Lombardi and in the sort of the real version of him, not just this quote that you see, and John Wooden, and I would say many other great coaches. It's that's where the focus is. The focus is on doing things the right way. Because everybody, the truth is, everybody wants to win. Maybe there's certain examples. Maybe there's a couple people here or there that are, tanking or checked out or burnt out from the sport, and winning no longer becomes as important to them. But ultimately, people care about winning. People, athletes, they want to win. But if that's all that, if that's all that it's based on, if that's all that, that you're focusing on a day-to-day basis, you completely lose sight of this other side, of your process, of, of those character traits that you're trying to embody. You completely lose sight of everything that it actually takes to not only win more, but to be that better and better person, that better and better tennis player that you're striving for. So I think, I think we're through this episode, we're sort of tackling this from a number of different angles, but it's, it's, I think there are just some really great examples of coaches and of athletes. I mean, we can, think about many of the greatest tennis players who, yes, they want to win, but their focus is not about that. Their focus and their priorities is on something bigger.
Yeah. And they've all built kind of a persona around them that includes doing the work every day, right? Having the correct attitude, never giving up. Yeah. And I think that's what we all need to do is, can we develop a persona that is extremely professional, where we're willing to do what other people are not willing to do. We're willing to do what is necessary, whether we feel like it or not. We're willing to do the little things, the stretching, the recovering, the eating well, going to bed on time, or taking a nap. And these are the things that ultimately lead to, better results. But the emphasis goes in there. And I think, when it comes to the paradox of the ego and letting go of the ego, is understanding that outcomes by themselves tend to sabotage who we're becoming. And that's especially true when you don't have a sense of who you want to be out there, right? So, good discussion, Josh. Thanks for finding this topic today. And that's our show for today. Thank you all for listening. For more on today's episode, please check out the show notes. If you have any feedback or questions for the two of us, please email us at tennisiqpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the content that Josh and I discuss on the show, please rate and review the podcast so other tennis enthusiasts can find it more easily. Additionally, to be notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice, including YouTube, and you can also check us out on Instagram. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/tennisiqpodcast/membership, where you can learn about the benefits of being part of the Tennis IQ podcast community. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon in our next episode.